Hey trackers, I'm looking at this oak tree right here, and you can see something standing out on this tree, and that is the lighter colored bark. And this is fresh damage. There may even be a few tracks down here from who did this, which is a black-tailed deer buck. And note that there are all these broken off branches down here on the ground. This one's been broken in half, and these ones have also been broken off. So these are fresh breaks. They kind of glow on the landscape because it's a lighter color where the fresh breaks are. And they're just dangling here. The leaves haven't completely wilted yet. They're not dead yet. So this is not really super old sign. And then over here, this looks like where the buck kind of thrashed this brush with his antlers. And there's gouge marks in here, if the camera will focus. These gouge marks come from the tines of the buck's antlers near the brow of the head. And as the buck is rubbing its antlers and kind of thrashing around in this brush, those antler tines will gouge pieces out of the bark like this. They're sharp, and they're in an irregular sort of pattern. Camera focus. There. So they're sharp marks in an irregular pattern, unlike claws that you find from other species like bears. The claw trees, these are in a very irregular pattern, and there really isn't you can't count the number of claws on these because these weren't made by claws. These were made by the antlers of the buck as it rubbed and thrashed on this branch. And you saw that piece fall off there. That happens a lot. I don't see any fur snagged on here. I don't really expect to. But looking underneath it, you can see this stringy appearance right here. And that's because when the bucks rub them, they're rubbing up and down with their antlers. And it just scratches the bark right off. So it's not a neat sign. It's really kind of messy, as opposed to when bears or squirrels peel bark. They tend to do it for other purposes like marking, or in the case of squirrels, to gather for nesting material. And so the squirrels will just peel the bark right off, and it'll be gone, or pieces will fall to the ground. And on squirrels, you don't see this messy appearance to it. So when you look underneath this branch, you can see old damage that's probably about a year old. This is from last year's activities where the buck was rubbing its antlers on this same tree. And note that there are stringy pieces still clinging to it. And this will look like that after a year. But right now it's super fresh. The markings still have some green and yellow on them. They're still damp. You can see right here, you can see the rub marks in this fine coating on the bark. So you have to kind of rub to get that to happen. And that's what happened here. So this is really fresh. This mark right here still shows up kind of yellow because the bark hasn't darkened yet with age and weathering. This also still shows really bright. So all this damage was done by a black-tailed deer buck as it was rubbing its antlers. So this is something you look for as a tracker, and it doesn't have to do with the species of the tree. It just has to do with the activities of the animal. They like these, I think, because they're sticking out over the river bar here. Let me show you. So these are easy to access because they can walk right under it. It's right here on the river, and it's easy for them to get under it and just rub their antlers and go to town on this thing. Another deer sign you notice on this is the lower branches have all been browsed, and most of the leaves are gone from those lower branches because that's the height that the deer can reach easily. They can't reach these up here without standing on their hind legs, so these leaves tend to stay here undamaged. So there's also a browse line here that also tells you deer have been active down here for a while. So this is the sign that stands out to me right now, is this very fresh damage to this willow, and all that was done by a buck with its antlers. I'll show you a different species of tree in just a second. So here, about 15-20 feet from the other tree I just showed you, is a white alder. And this one also stands out because of the fresh damage to the trunk here. This is again done by the buck. And I hope the camera will focus. There we go. So see how there are marks from the rubbing activity of those antlers on this. And then broken branches. And just basically peeled off bark. And you can see gouge marks in it from the tines of the antler that are on the forehead or the brow of the buck. This right here is healed damage from previous, possibly a buck, possibly some mechanical damage. I can't tell on this because I don't see enough sign there, but there's healed damage on the tree right there. Right here, you see all the gouge marks and the really rough appearance of this, as opposed to, say, a feeding sign where you might see incisor marks or really neat paired marks from teeth from rabbits or squirrels or porcupines. You don't see that with these. These are really messy, and it's just kind of that up and down motion of the antlers that creates this shredded appearance to the bark. So there you go. There's a buck antler rubbing sign on several species of trees.